Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar. We're going to get started in just a second and let a few other people join. Hello, and welcome to a governed self-service data platform accelerates insights. When you join today's webinar, you selected join either by phone call or computer audio. For any reason you'd like to change that selection, you can do by accessing the audio pane in the control panel on your right. Also, from the same control panel, you'll be able to have the opportunity to submit questions to the presenters. Just type the questions in the questions pane and we'll collect those and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. If for some reason we're not able to get to your question, we'll respond to those personally through email. The deck will be available through SlideShare along with a recording of the webinar 2 to 3 days after the conclusion of the presentation, so please keep an eye out for that. My name is Ryan Peterson. I'm the Global Technology Segment Lead for Data at Amazon Web Services. I'm going to be the host and moderator for today's webinar. I'm joined today by Scott Gidley, Vice President of Product Management at Zaloni. He's going to go over a bit about data catalogs, and before we get started with that, I'm going to kind of discuss some things around what AWS thinks around governance. We're going to talk about creating a flexible and responsive data platform with minimal operational costs. We're going to talk about self-service data catalogs to identify enterprise-wide actionable insights, and how to empower users to immediately discover and provision that data that they need. So AWS customers consistently tell us that there's 5 major reasons that they choose AWS at a high level. And the first one is around agility, the ability to very quickly spin up the equipment that you need to use the various software that you want to use. Elasticity, to be able to scale that in very automated ways and controlled ways to let you grow without having to administer a large scale environment. The globalization opportunity, so as you scale your business into multiple different countries, to be able to copy and paste the same type of infrastructure in different regions and also maintain all of those different compliances in those regions. From a cost perspective, instead of having to buy equipment, figure out how much you need, and sometimes end up buying too much equipment and having to deprovision things, cost becomes something that's very manageable in an AWS environment. And finally, functionality. With thousands of new features every year, we look to create and expand upon an ever-growing list of capabilities and functionality. But we're here because we see a growing trend. The front page of the news seems to be always littered with these problems of PII breach incidents. And just in the last couple of minutes that I've been talking, we've seen over 10,000 records stolen from some bad actor. You can see here that just in 2017, there were 1,700 consumer incidents, with 72% of those being an outsider attacker. And we spend a lot of time thinking about how do you stop an outside attacker from getting into data. But the things that really matter are the internal attackers, the people that you trust to do the right thing with your data. How do you manage your data environment in such a way that those insiders have the right access they need without getting too much access or getting the wrong kind of access or keeping it too long? And so we want to talk about that a little bit today. A staggering number, though, is in the end of this year, you see just billions of records stolen, which basically means half of the world's population will have seen a data breach within the year. We really would like to see our customers work with us to try to reduce those counts. So when we brought this question to customers, what do you know about your data? Where is it? We spoke to various C-level executives, and it was really amazing how many of them had these kinds of questions. And so to throw a few of them out there, what type of information am I collecting? Where do I collect it from? Do I have the legal statements? Am I managing the downstream? So as my analysts are working on data, are they using the data respectful of the consumer collection statement that they collected? So if they say they won't use data for a certain purpose, are they following along with that? Are they doing the wrong thing or the right thing? How do they know if rogue agents even took the data or misused it until it's too late? And as we've all seen in many of these big hacks, it's been the C-level executives that have had the biggest strain. Think about it, some of these really big ones, the biggest loss of financial value for a company could come because of a breach, because of one person within an IT organization who might do the wrong thing, or any organization for that matter. So CEOs are not the only ones that are worried about this problem. The regulators are out there also worried about this problem now. There's been plenty of regulations over the many years that have had various privacy requirements. PCI is maybe a good example of that, where it's about privatizing the payment card transactions to try to make it so that there's less theft. But really the big 100-pound gorilla on the block is this GDPR that came out of Europe, and then the equivalent CCPA that came out of California. I haven't even had the time to update this slide to include things like the Brazilian requirements, the Australian requirements, the Canadian requirements, and just dozens of others throughout various countries, and dozens more that are coming. The different requirements are going to be different for each country, and we're going to try to have to deal with all of these different privacy regimes. So as me and my team started thinking about what is the root cause of all of this, we came to the conclusion that it's PII. And the moment that you collect PII or connect to it, you develop some sort of risk of misuse of that data. The moment that you store that data outside of collection, you then have additional risk added to that. The moment you use that data, you've added additional risk to storage and collection. But where it really gets tricky is when you start proliferating data. And so if you don't understand where the data was collected and where it's proliferated to, that can become a bit of a challenge. And so the need for data cataloging becomes really critical as we move PII throughout the organization for various purposes. Finally, the deletion of PII and knowing when it's appropriate and also when it's required legally. So we started designing out a solution. We came up with a few different design criteria with all of the normal things you would expect around, for example, having a data catalog and having all the common systems like ETLing, et cetera, all need to be in there. But do we suggest ETL versus ELT? Well, ELT says we extract, we load, then we transform. And the challenge of that is that the data is now already landed in the other environment. The PII exists, which means that the storage administrators, the file system administrators, any person with permissions to change those permissions now have access. So by doing ETL and transforming out PII during the transformation or during the movement is really a better way of handling it. We really worry about the proliferation more than the collection. We realize that in order to do business, you probably need to be able to ship somebody your products. You're going to have their address. In order to deal with customer service, you may need their phone number or email address. We realize that hashing is, we think, better than encryption. Now, encryption may be needed for particular purposes, but if you can get away with it, hashing means it's a one-way process and can't be turned back into the original consumer. And finally, when we get into matching systems, we feel like decentralized matching is better than centralized matching, only because if you take a lot of different PII and you put it into a single place for matching, then you've created a honeypot for hackers. So that led us to build an architecture, and there's a lot of little icons on here. I don't want to scare people. It's really just intended to say that there's a lot of options for things that can be used to do various elements. But overall, these are different things that can be done if you should need it. So an example of where you may or may not have a need is if you collect a lot of video and images and you have handwriting on those images where it might be PII, then you may want to use our recognition service to be able to grab all of that information off the image. If you're streaming log data through Kinesis, you can use Firehose to ETL that content and ultimately get the data in as well. So each thing has a different purpose. But today what we want to do is focus our energy on talking about how the data lake ultimately transitions information into the data catalog and why the data catalog is so critical. Before I hand it over to Scott to talk more about what Zeloni does and how the data catalog works with Zeloni, I wanted to kind of give you an idea of metaphor. My kids, so I've got young kids, they have Legos all over the house. And I ask them, what do you want to build these Legos? And they have no idea where to start because they don't even know where all the Legos are. So if we have a day where we go, okay, we're going to go collect all the Legos, we're going to go put them back in the bin. And then while we do that, we kind of count, how many of these? Do we have 2 wings? Can we build an airplane on it? Do we have wheels to build a car? And in reality is it really stuck for me that, hey, you know what, this is data. If I don't have knowledge of all of the different elements, of all the pieces that I have to build an insight, how can I possibly get the right value and insight out of my data? So to me, we got to figure out where all the wings are, where all the tires are, where all the information is so that we can get to the right appropriate output. So with that, I want to hand it over to Scott and have Scott kind of go through what Zeloni does to support this governance architecture.
Hey, Ryan, thanks for the introduction and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to learn a little bit about a self-service data platform that focuses on data cataloging as the foundation to make data producers and consumers a little more efficient in their work, but still drive a lot of the governance processes that organizations require so that they can meet all the regulatory compliance initiatives, but still process data at scale. So as we go through my presentation, I'm going to take a look at some of the data modernization challenges that our customers have faced, how we initially approached that with a solution that helped drive data lake management and data lake enterprise sort of data management capabilities. But as we looked to enable more of the connect versus collect architecture that Ryan mentioned, where you're not proliferating data into a common area just to do it, but you're maybe being a little more thoughtful about how and when and who moves the data into these different environments. So, traditionally, as Zeloni has managed enterprise level data lakes for organizations for many, many years now, we see these common data modernization challenges that our customers and different organizations are facing, right? They want to be a little more efficient with how quickly they can get data made available for insights, but they're struggling with architectural complexity. The big data landscape, whether you're building out solutions on premise or in the cloud, there's lots of different tooling that provides lots of different capabilities, and you need to figure out how you're going to stitch these various tools together in a way that not only performs the capability that you need, but also adheres to your internal data governance processes. And this has driven sort of a lack of skill sets, right? People who are more familiar with enterprise data warehouses, more of a SQL infrastructure, they may be using tooling that's a little less familiar to them, and maybe traditionally or in the past have focused on learning MapReduce, and now maybe they're working with Spark or some different types of technologies that they're having to raise their skill set up at the same time that they're trying to solve a business problem. And certainly managing data across cloud and hybrid environments can be challenging, although that's becoming more and more commoditized, and it's easier to do with all the tooling that not only AWS provides, but solutions like Zeloni's offer that as well. And as you look at this architectural complexity, it drives then into how are you managing your data and not forgoing all of the data quality, data governance, data security principles that maybe you've had in place for years and years. And really the key to that, the hub of all that, is metadata management. How are we capturing the proper business, technical, and operational metadata so that end users can easily answer the questions of, why have I collected this information? What information am I collecting? Is the data being used appropriately? Is it being secured appropriately? And being able to then gather if there's any risk or misuse of this information throughout the enterprise. That really has to start on the foundation of metadata management and ultimately a data catalog. And then ultimately, as you build out this new data modernization platform, you want to have automation and intelligence built into that automation so that it's simply rinse and repeat, or you can start making recommendations based on previous work or previous data sources, maybe that you catalog, that you can recommend different types of data governance or data lifecycle policies for similar types of data. And then finally, as we expand all of this out, the ability to govern this at scale across your enterprise or across data sources that may be outside your enterprise are important. So you don't want to drive data swamps where you have pockets of information that may not be collected or connected to, so that you can understand why that information might be useful. You don't want to create ponds where you're duplicating the same data governance policies, where if you change one, you have to change it in multiple places. You want to try and do this in a more holistic way. And I think, from a Zaloni perspective, and I was talking to Ryan about this, we started off saying, okay, the data lake is the way to go here. We're going to bring data in. We're going to pursue maybe a zone-based architecture where there's a landing zone, and maybe it's transient in nature, where all of this raw information comes in, and then we only move certain information into the raw zone or the trusted zone, and that's where perhaps some of the tokenization or encryption is done, or hashing is done to anonymize information as needed. And then there's maybe further refinements and more ETL types of processing that's done that moves the information into a refined or a sandbox zone where your data scientists or your business analysts can get access to it. And I think that works very well, and it's worked really well for many of our customers. But I think it also sort of creates more of that proliferation of information, because as data comes into your transient zone, it's the raw information that's maybe not been tokenized or hashed or encrypted. It's a copy of information that's coming from a source system and then being moved somewhere else, and you have to worry about what that proliferation might do from a misuse or some sort of breach of information. So we started pivoting to more of a data catalog approach, where we want you to catalog all of the information at its source, being able to define policies around who should have access to that information, what information in that data source should be accessible, and further describe the use cases of that data. And I think that really drives a lot of what we're seeing from sort of why data catalogs have become so popular, right? New data initiatives, people want to find out what data is available to them. According to Gartner, by 2020, organizations that provide access to curated catalog of internal and external assets will derive twice as much business value from analytic investments than those that do not. So again, it's making sure that people can quickly and easily see what data is out there, and more importantly, what data is relevant to them and how they should use it. And I think this is where being able to provide some level of context and meaning to the usefulness of data can jumpstart these new business initiatives. Regulatory compliance, I'm not going to spend too much time here. Ryan mentioned this quite a bit. But the fact of the matter is, any regulatory compliance is built on a foundation of being able to document, audit, and trace these information assets, and that includes the lineage of where maybe the data came from, how it was used and transformed over time, who performed these transformations, who has access to the data, and maybe certainly any PII or any secure information that is being stored in these particular data sources. A data catalog is a great way to be able to catalog data at its source and provide this map of information across and beyond your enterprise. And then finally, it wouldn't be a data management presentation if we didn't talk about these use cases for data scientists, and them being able to spend a large portion of their time, depending on the quotes that you'll see, they spend anywhere between 20 and 80% of their time trying to identify, collect, and prepare relevant data sets for their use cases. And the running joke is they spend the rest of the time complaining about how long it takes for them to find relevant data sets to use in their use cases. So I think a data catalog being able to more quickly help these data consumers, whether they're data scientists, business analysts, data stewards, and so forth, be able to find information that's relevant to them, and then share and collaborate on that with other people in their projects is really important. And really, this has been driven out of, from a Zaloni perspective, of our data lake, our core data lake management offerings. This is something that's critical as you add more and more data sets. We have customers who have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, different types of assets they're managing. They want all their different lines of business to be able to log on, browse the catalog, find data based on a rich set of facets and filters that they can use to find information that's going to help them do their job more effectively. And we've got some example use cases of this coming up later in the slide deck. So one of the things that I think is kind of interesting is data catalogs isn't a brand new technology. It's been around for several years, and they've become more and more popular. And I think there's two different types of data cataloging capabilities. There's sort of what I'm saying, the pure play data catalog, which is primarily used for inventorying and identification of information And they often use machine learning capabilities to provide really complex and really valuable data classification of elements, right? So how do I identify all of my name or my address, or maybe more importantly, social security number or credit card related information? And they're really helpful in these regulatory use cases where you want to be able to audit and find data of this different type. And they're also often used in conjunction with existing, perhaps, enterprise metadata or data governance solutions to feed information into those. And then there's also catalogs, I think, that are embedded more into applications to make those applications more useful. So things like analytic applications or data management applications may have a catalog, and they have a lot of the same features of the single purpose or pure play catalogs, but they're generally geared on improving the inventory of data or data that's known to that particular application. So a catalog that's integrated into an analytic application might expand the catalog to not just be data sets or files or things of that nature. Maybe they're expanding it to include analytic models that are being managed within the analytic platform. And even our Zaloni data platform, we provide a standalone data catalog, but it can be very well integrated with our overall platform. So if you want to just use the catalog, that's fine. But if you want to integrate it with some of our data movement and data transformation capabilities, you can do that as well. And I think as we go, there's really no right or wrong, right? It's really based on your usage case, your scenario within your organization. I think for all of these catalogs, we're going to continue to see a growth in capabilities around data collaboration. How do I share this information? How do I use the wisdom of crowds to make the most relevant information more easily locatable within the catalog? And then we started seeing more and more requests for things like data usage reporting via impact analysis and other types of things. And this really can drive back into what Ryan was talking about and some of the use cases from a regulatory perspective is how are people using data? We've had customers request reports to find how many people have requested access to data or tried to access data that they don't have access to, and they just want to keep an idea of who's maybe trying to find and use information that they're not licensed to use. So I think those are all sort of going to be cross-catalog capabilities that continue to be provided. But ultimately, we are seeing more and more our customers want to have an actionable data catalog. They want to have more of a marketplace environment where not only can they use the catalog to find data, they can see profile information, they can see lineage and impact analysis and all of those things, but then they want to be able to transform or potentially provision that data into a sandbox environment. And that sandbox could be a data lake. It could be something like Redshift, where they're moving data into a data warehouse for some specific use or some specific data mart. That's really powerful because, and I'll go through some examples of why there's a struggle right now in the industry where there's too many separations of concerns across these different types of tools that actually can drive a hole through your governance process. If you have from the catalog the ability to transfer data, maybe do some lightweight manipulation or provision this information, it can also immediately update the catalog and keep it current. So you want to maintain that catalog currency so that as soon as there's a change or as soon as this data is moved somewhere else, it's immediately updated. You have a reflection from a lineage and an impact analysis perspective. So this is what we started to see, and as we've built out more of our self-service data platform, it includes not only the data catalog, which is sort of the connect part of this overall platform, but also the ability to provision and transform data, which does more of the data collection. But it allows you to do it in a little more intelligent way than maybe we've done before. So as we drive through and down into some of the details with regards to what we see in our catalog or what we see our customers asking for, there's really sort of three main areas you can break this down into. There's sort of the discovery catalog and perhaps some self-service ingestion capabilities. Then there's sort of the self-service data preparation and provisioning and manipulation of the data. And then there is the marketplace or the ability to collaborate and share this information. So I'll go through some specific examples of each of these here. From a discovery and catalog perspective, I think the most important thing as you evaluate data cataloging technologies is you want to be able to catalog as much information as possible. So certainly relational databases, data lakes are part of that. But you also want the ability to do some automated data inventory. And what I mean by automated data inventory is you don't want to have to process or transform the data in any way for it to be added to your catalog. You want to be able to see an S3 bucket. You want to be able to see a file system and catalog and extract metadata from the individual files and tag those files as part of the catalog. So you want to be able to crawl and see these different types of standards that might be out there, these different types of data sources that might be out there. Ryan and I were talking earlier about the need for people to be able to catalog things like emails or wikis or other types of content management systems, and whether that's part of the overall cataloging process or is that something different. And we see it moving in that direction. So either via APIs or the ability to pull information or from those systems and be able to add that information to the catalog. I think there's value in that as we move forward. The other thing I think you want to see from a catalog is the ability to leverage enterprise definitions and standards. And what I mean by that and why this is valuable is we work with lots of customers who have spent a lot of time and effort and money to build out enterprise data governance solutions or enterprise metadata management solutions where they've created their enterprise version of customer and they want to have a certain set of business terms available to end users that fully describes what information makes up customer, what data quality rules might be needed to apply to customer-related information, and then certainly other information around who can have access to this data. And they've stored that in something like an IBM governance catalog or potentially Calibra, and they want to integrate that into their catalog so that when I browse for customer-related data, I can see these business terms associated directly with that. So one of the things that we provide is a metadata exchange framework, which allows us to incorporate information from a lot of these corporate enterprise standards into our catalog. Another thing that we see people wanting to do is catalog their catalogs, right? So from an AWS perspective, Glue is a really nice catalog capability for S3 buckets and potentially even information that's on premise. And if you're using that for certain use cases, but you're looking for broader capabilities, the ability to read information from Glue or update information in Glue from our catalog is something that we see customers asking for over and over again. And then certainly for any cataloging capability, the ability to annotate and further customize attributes based on your business need is important. As a provider of this technology, no matter what, every customer has their own requirements. They want to create an attribute that's specific to them around line of business or data owner or whatever it might be, allowing them the flexibility to create new attributes and have those attributes stored and saved in their catalog, but ultimately part of the search capability of the catalog so you can quickly search on any data that's part of my marketing line of business is really important. So having that flexibility is something you should definitely look for. And then I think something that's sort of growing in request, and again, part of making it an actionable catalog is the ability to empower subject matter experts not only to discover new data, but potentially ingest it into a new environment or potentially a data lake environment. And we'll talk through some of our use cases where we have customers that are cataloging Teradata related information, as well as some other third-party data services that they have provided to them, and they want to pull that information into an S3 bucket so that it ultimately can be loaded into Redshift or queried via Athena. And being able to do that from the catalog, if you have the right permissions or the right type of user, saves them a lot of effort from an IT perspective of having to have a different type of application that makes that possible. Another area that I mentioned, so now that we've built this catalog, we've made it extensible, it's searchable, people can find information of relevance, they have access to potentially third-party or enterprise-level data governance standards. The next thing they may want to do is drive some self-service data preparation or provisioning capabilities. They may want to move this information from one environment to another. And in this particular case, I think, self-service data preparation capabilities are pretty well understood in the market, and it's become more and more of a mature capability. But being able to drive this directly from the catalog is really powerful. You know, I was reading a Forbes article where, again, there was a Crowdflower survey of data scientists who said they were spending somewhere between 19 and 20% of their time collecting or identifying this information before they could then move forward and prepare or manage it. And if those capabilities aren't available in the same interface, or if they're not part of the same overall governance process, then there can be a hole in your overall data governance strategy where you can find information, you're doing something, creating some new artifact from that. Are you sure that that's following the same governance processes that you would want from before? So being able to do all of this from a metadata catalog allows you to do the transformation and update the catalog immediately, and then potentially set permissions or roles on who has access to this new artifact. So it allows you to drive a lot of those sort of data privacy concerns directly from the catalog through any newly created data asset. The other thing I think that's important to consider here is that you want to be able to scale out this capability and not have it be something that's driven just from a single end user perspective. And what I mean by that is you want to be able to do some of the self-service data preparation and schedule and manage and operationalize it based on your data infrastructure. So when we talk about some of the use case examples that Zeloni provides, we are going to be spinning up EMR clusters potentially within AWS to do any of the data processing that needs to be performed to drive some of these data transformations, whether that's tokenizing data, joining two data sets together, filtering out information, and so forth. So you want it to be able to scale based on your internal or external infrastructure, whether that's on-premise or in the cloud, and you want it to be able to be governed by your data management policies. So it may be that I have the ability as a catalog user to find data assets. I can build a recipe here to do some transformations, but it actually has to be executed by Ryan because he's the person who has the overall data stewardship or ownership of the data itself. So we can generate the workflow or generate the recipe that's going to be used to execute this, but it can be executed by somebody else. So again, having it managed by the policies that you want to run from an IT perspective is important, even if you're enabling some of this for your business end users. And then lastly, I think the ability to collaborate and share this information and provision it out to other parts of your organization or other applications who want to use it is probably the number one request we've been getting from our customers. So they've queried the catalog, they found these 4 data sets. One has customer data, one has sales transaction data, and one has some sort of marketing leads information. I want to take these 3 data sets, I want to add them to a shopping cart, and then I want to move them to Redshift because that's going to be used by some reporting application to drive some sort of BI report or some sort of analytic process, right? So I want to be able to simply do that from the catalog and not have to drive a lot of other IT processes to make that happen. So as you're evaluating cataloging technologies, the ability to create workspaces where you can take multiple data sets that might be from different parts of the organization or different projects, move them into a collaborative workspace. Again, continue to annotate or customize any of the metadata that are associated with these assets, and then provision them through a sort of a self-service wizard where you can add them to a shopping cart, deliver it to a data science environment, whether it be a data lake or a particular zone in the data lake, or in this case, Redshift is an example that we'll use from one of our customers, or directly enable it in a data visualization tool like Tableau, or any of the other ones that are available. So being able to say, hey, I want to pull this information directly into Tableau can be useful. And again, as this information happens, as it's getting pulled into Tableau, it's updating the catalog with this new data asset. If it's been moved into a new environment, that's immediately searchable in the catalog. There's lineage to show which data sets it came from within the catalog and what transformations might have been provided or placed on top of it as it was moved into this new storage container, again, whether it's Tableau or whether it's Redshift or a Teradata workspace and those types of things. So I think that's probably the biggest key is this self-service platform has to span your entire data lifecycle and data management policies. You don't want to leave any holes in there, because then that opens up some new artifact, as Ryan mentioned earlier, that a bad actor can come in and maybe get access to, and you're proliferating more data than necessary to ultimately solve the business problem that's at hand. Okay, so we talked about some of the capabilities that we provide in this data marketplace, in the self-service data platform, especially through the catalog. Now let's look from an architecture perspective what it might look like from an Amazon implementation. Right, so on the left, as you look across this diagram, you'll see things like the source databases, files, and streams of information that might be coming into your VPC. So certainly from a Zaloni data platform perspective, we can integrate with the AWS directory service. So if you're using Active Directory or LDAP or some other means on premise to manage users, you can reuse a lot of that capability. So this is where the platform can then catalog these sources, so the databases and the files themselves. At that point, if you want to manage ingestion, you could pull the data in to S3 if you want to, which it may ultimately want to end up in something like Redshift. But in each part of this process, we are capturing and tagging the metadata and making that available within the catalog. So again, if we come from the left to right here, you see things like landing zones, raw zones, trusted zones. Think of these as S3 buckets that maybe have been set up to manage your S3 data lake. And as data comes in from your databases and files, we capture the metadata of where that data was. We capture the lineage of any transformations that maybe have made against it. We could apply data quality or data tokenization and encryption of the data. So maybe landing zone is some sort of temporary, EFS storage where we're bringing data in, capturing only the data we need, applying tokenization before any of that information gets moved to the raw zone. Then the landing zone may be a transient thing where it goes away, so you stop some of the proliferation of that data. Then you have your catalog users who can now see the information in the raw zone if they have access to it, or they could see data in the raw zone and say, hey, I don't have access to it. Can I request access to get some of this information? And this is where, as we make more transformations to the data from raw to trusted to refined, we can spin up an Amazon EMR cluster, deploy Spark or MapReduce capabilities to it. It can be scaled based on your needs. So we have customers who, may burst up their EMR processing for a certain period during the day, but they maybe only keep a few clusters that are resident a few nodes in the cluster that are resident all the time for their execution capabilities. And then ultimately, the data is being stored and processed in S3 can immediately become queryable from things like Amazon Athena or potentially the Elasticsearch service. And you can use our provisioning capability, as I talked about before, the ability to have our marketplace to see data that's in these S3 buckets and provision them into something like Redshift or Amazon QuickSight for immediate use in things like Tableau or Kibana. So that's sort of an overall view of the information and how we sort of manage this flow of data within Amazon. And what I really like about the architecture is it's completely flexible. So if you're just going to use us for cataloging information as you move it into S3, that's one thing. If you want to use us for more data transformations, data quality, tokenization, and encryption of information, we can integrate directly with Amazon EMR and all those processes to be able to provide the compute layer that's needed to deliver this. And then it's immediately available in any of the ways you may want to consume it from the various Amazon services. So let's take a quick look at some of these customers that we have that are currently using the Zaloni platform to help manage their data catalog and their self-service data platform in an AWS environment. This first one is an insurance company based in the US, and their whole goal was really to create a more personalized insurance offerings, basically driving a customer 360 initiative in the cloud. So they're taking data from lots of different cross-channel data foundation sources. So some of this is coming from places where they're getting various AdWords, integration with their Adobe Omniture infrastructure, pulling data in from internal systems as well on a daily basis, on a hourly basis. They're pulling information through a pipeline, driving that to a sort of 360-degree view of customer information that then is feeding several of their analytic applications. So it actually says here as part of the solution, the storage is Amazon S3, publishing is Amazon Redshift, but that's actually a mistake. In this case, the publishing is going to an Elasticsearch environment that they're then using Kibana and a couple other capabilities to drive some of their reporting that they wanted to deliver. So they were doing things like ingesting information, cataloging certainly was a big part of it, and then they used a lot of workflow automation that we provided to pull the source information and pull it through and create updated views of customer on an ad hoc or an hourly basis. And if you look at the solution architecture, this is actually a little bit different than the one that I mentioned that was sort of the more common architecture. In this case, they were using our platform and they were using AWS primarily. S3 is a storage infrastructure, but also they were using EC2 to drive the HDFS components. So they were building out a Hadoop data lake. So if you look from left to right here, there's various different data services, cloud-based marketing information that they were driving. They had internal CRM and ODS applications that were coming in. And again, there was this sort of polling event-based architecture that's pulling data from these various systems on a timed basis or an event basis and driving it through an FTP server where ultimately our platform would pull this information in and catalog it. And then down below, there was the whole Adobe infrastructure, and they were driving some identity management capabilities via Adobe that was also feeding into this Customer 360 implementation. So as the information came in, and our software in this case was deployed on EC2 instances and Amazon, the cluster compute was being driven by, again, sort of an EC2-driven cluster of Hortonworks data platform. So we had set up various zones for raw, refined, and trusted information, but we had a transient landing zone that was Amazon EFS, and again, that was so that the information, once it comes in, and certain processes are taken to obfuscate or encrypt or secure the information, that raw data would get moved and dropped away as part of the EFS. It would be deleted so that we weren't proliferating that through the rest of the platform. They also had this really cool archival process where they were pulling data from the HDFS environment into S3 from an archival perspective. And the reason that they did that, and they had this set up on again, on an event-driven or timing-driven process, was that the information was only valid for certain periods of time. So it may be that some of the information that was coming from the cloud or from their CRM and ODS initiatives were only available for 30 days, or maybe it was 6 months, or maybe I think the maximum end of it was 5 years. And they wanted to be able to check the sort of overall life cycle of the data, the timeliness of the information, and then they wanted to archive it off of their core data platform into an archival solution in S3 in this particular case. The other thing that was kind of interesting in this overall platform was they used the self-service interface for querying the catalog to publish data into a few different environments. So there was the serving layer store that was Elasticsearch, where they were creating these Customer 360 dashboards in Kibana, but they were also moving that information into some other applications. I do think Redshift was being used here as well. So this is a little bit different. I would say this is more the collect architecture than just the connect architecture, but what was critical was for them to be able to get all of this information from these source systems, catalog it, make it available as part of this overall Customer 360 use case. And then quickly, I know we're running late on time here before we get to questions. The other use case was from a pharmaceutical company, also US-based, where they were just trying to reduce their overall time to insight for their analytics users and their business users, and they wanted them to have a more collaborative environment. So they were essentially cataloging data from lots of different applications, both on-premise and in the cloud. and they wanted to have a more governed self-service way to control who could see which assets were in the catalog, and then ultimately which ones could provision information into Amazon Redshift. So they were heavy users of Redshift in this particular case. And their architecture was very similar to the one that I originally showed, which had the Zaloni Data Platform cataloging data that was on premise. So their Viva CRM and other applications, SAP and so forth. So they were cataloging information there. The ZDP platform was being run in EC2. We're always run sort of in a persisted EC2 instance. And we use the EFS shared file system for things like our log files and other information that we're sharing. And as you'll see that as the line points down through here, we were also using Amazon RDS with MySQL instance, as well as an Elasticsearch instance to store our metadata and our search capabilities. And what's really cool about this is the EMR instance for any of the compute we were doing was totally transient. So we can spin that up, have that go away. We're saving the metadata of the information that's ultimately being stored in S3 or in other storage devices. So people can still query our catalog, see the information that's available both on-premise or in their cloud-based environments, whether it's Redshift or the data lake, and then we can perform the compute in a completely elastic and transient way. So this is a very powerful solution that we're looking to replicate on many of our customers who are going more all in on the AWS solution architecture. And just to wrap up very quickly, our platform is really an integrated self-service platform. We're trying to accelerate time to insight and reduce a lot of the complexities that go across managing these difficult cloud and on-premise environments. And we're trying to drive this whole concept of enable, govern, and engage throughout our entire platform. So how do you catalog and ingest information? How do you govern it? And then ultimately, how do you engage the business to have access to it in a way that helps them do their job more efficiently? And with that, I will turn it back over to Ryan for our Q&A section. Thank you very much for your time.
Scott, thank you very much for that very, very insightful information. We're going to transition into Q&A. It's a live Q&A session. So as a reminder, please submit any written questions to the questions panel on your right. In the event that we're not able to answer any of those questions, we'll get back to each of you individually. All right, let me start with a few of them here. So Gunjan asked the question, AWS Glue does data cataloging. How does Zaloni differ?
Yeah, so I'll take that question. So we get that question asked quite a bit. So Glue is a relatively new cataloging capability from AWS, and it does a fine job for information that's stored in S3 or in other AWS applications. We have a little more capability to first and foremost drive some more annotation and customization of the information that's stored in the catalog, so we can enhance some of the information that's stored in Glue. We also have the ability, as I mentioned here, to do some of the provisioning in a more self-service way than perhaps Glue provides. As we look to move forward, we kind of see our catalog being something that can consume other catalogs or publish our information into catalogs if somebody wants to expand their Glue usage as well.
All right, yeah, and I tend to agree. AWS Glue is really a technical solution that helps to gather all the information from the assets within AWS. All of the business criteria elements are really where Zaloni picks up that ball pretty well. Amin asked the question, we saw a few different solution architectures. Is Zaloni selling a product license, consultancy services, or all of the above?
So Zaloni sells a product license. There's certainly some enablement capabilities that we can provide to help build out your infrastructure if needed, but we primarily sell the product and the customers implement it based on their need. One area that we do work closely with our customers is if they want to add a new source or a new connection that maybe we don't provide out of the box. We can create custom connections, or let's say that's a file that we don't support natively that you want to really get more metadata from. being able to create custom connectors or custom parsers for that data is something that we partner with our customers to build, and then we'll make it available in our product after the fact. And in some cases, our customers can build those on their own.
Another question from Amin is, do you support hierarchical data cataloging?
So you can create, that's a good question. You can create hierarchies within the data that's stored. So if, let's say, you wanted to store something like a hierarchy of the organizational structure where data might reside. So it's, under the marketing, slash retail slash, consumer or retail slash, business hierarchy. You can create that level of hierarchy within our metadata attributes. But what we don't allow you to do is sort of drag and drop and create a hierarchy of relationships of entities across different environments. We don't have that capability just yet.
Perfect. So Paul asked the question, can you automatically remove permissions from a user after you think they're done with it?
Yeah, we could. So I guess the question would be, how do we determine whether that a user is done with it? So we associate users and have role-based access controls to the entities in the catalog. So those could be controlled or updated programmatically via lots of different things. So let's say there's a time-based event where we don't want users to have access to information in the catalog. We could remove them from a project as part of a workflow that we could create and automate that says, like, after 60 days, this group of users no longer has access to this particular entity. We could definitely do those types of things if that's what the question is.
Yeah, I'd like to throw in my own questions here, Scott. So I know you guys have this concept of the golden record. It'd be interesting to understand how you deal with various data sets, databases, various file assets, and know that you're dealing with the same consumer record across many different elements of data.
Yeah, so the golden record, the way we enable that is via a capability we have that's called the Data Master extension, and it's a Spark machine learning driven data matching sort of entity resolution type of solution. So what we let you do is train the models based on your live data to get to a level of accuracy of matching for whatever data type it might be. Then when we deploy it and execute it on sort of multiple data sets, that's where we sort of use, under the covers, we're using the power of a data lake to bring these various data sets together and harmonize them in some way so that we can apply the data across all of them and identify sort of the single record that's going to identify them across the various clusters. There's not a ton of magic there as far as how that data is brought together in the data lake. That's sort of what we use our platform to do. So it's not sort of a decentralized way to do it, as you mentioned, as part of the IPC.
So following up on that question, so with like Article 30 of GDPR, with reporting out about use of PI, I assume that golden record system, in theory, could allow you to report out on individuals that maybe have requested to be forgotten or things like that.
Yeah, that could certainly be an attribute of one of the things that we master. So, whether you want to be included or not included as part of that.
Very interesting. All right, I think we've come to the end of the questions. I'll give it another minute or so just to see if any questions come in. If you have your questions, make sure you type them quickly. I don't see any, so I don't want to. Oh, again. Yeah. So Seema's asking quite a question to go over the kind of the costing elements. How do you go about pricing Zaloni?
Sure. So there's a couple different mechanisms for pricing. So if we're delivering purely in an AWS environment, there's a core cost of the platform, which is fixed. And then if you're using sort of an elastic capability for processing data, and you're using us for any level of compute, then there's a compute hour charge that's associated with it. So think of it as, in order to get the platform up and running, to populate your catalog initially, there's sort of a fixed cost, and then that can be tiered based on how much data you're going to catalog and so forth. And then if you're using us for that provisioning or transformation of the data, there'll be a compute hour charge.
And then any kind of follow-up question, is there any idea of like the number of hours, time, et cetera, with implementing Zeloni into an environment?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have sort of basic enablement services for customers, which is generally 4 to 8 weeks to get you up and running into a production level environment. And then some customers may have some specific types of implementations. We have different offerings for things like, for instance, we have one that's called Data Lake in a Box, where based on the number of sources and the number of use cases, we will get your implementation up and running and sort of hand over to you within a certain environment. And this is for a lot of our customers who maybe are trying to dip their toe in the data lake pool and want to get, they don't want to sort of stub their toe or have any of the headaches of the folks who sort of went through the initial implementations, and they want us to help them go from start to finish for a certain use case or for a certain set of data sets, and then hand it over to them and let them manage it from there moving forward. And they're all tiered. If you're interested in that, just reach out to us and we can go through any of the different options we have from not only a licensing but an implementation perspective.
And Scott, is there any vertical markets that you would say Zeloni is better at, whether it's like healthcare, finance, et cetera?
Yeah, so I think certainly financial services is an area where we've made a lot of headway from a customer perspective, and we have also and we have some accelerators from a file connectivity and management perspective for things like healthcare, whether it's HL7 and some of the other different EDI formats that we support natively. And then also from a telco perspective. So I think telco, financial services, and healthcare are sort of the three areas where we've cut our teeth.
Perfect. All right, I think we've gotten a lot of good questions. We're coming up on the top of the hour. Any last thoughts, Scott?
No, I just thank you so much. This has been a really interesting topic for me to present on, and the whole concept of the de-identified data lake and the IPC environment that you're driving, I think, is pretty revolutionary.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for your time today, and for all the attendees, thank you for taking time out of your day to spend time with AWS and Zeloni. We appreciate and look forward to following up with you. Have a wonderful rest of your week.